Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and by paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Lifestyle Committee meeting of the 15th of June 2022, and I declare the meeting open at 9 a.m. I'd like to advise attendees in the room that the meeting is being webcasted and audio recorded. Now, councillors, I note a couple of councillors still haven't arrived yet. I have it on advice that Councillor Herrmeyer is on his way and will be with us soon. Councillors, do we have any leaves of absence to declare? Has anyone heard from Councillor Bannon? Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yesterday I received notice that Councillor Bannon has man flu and couldn't attend yesterday's committee meetings. But my understanding is that doesn't go away in a day, so I would imagine it was extended to the committee meetings today.
Okay, I haven't actually had any formal notification of Councillor Bannon being unwell today, but thank you for the advice, Councillor Lane. Councillors, do I have someone to move to accept Councillor Bannon's leave of absence for today? Thank you, Councillor Lane. Seconder, we have a seconder in Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you, everyone. That's been unanimously carried. May Councillor Bannon's recovery be swift. Hope to have him here for budget on Monday. Okay, councillors, I would just like to note that there's illnesses gripping the building at the moment. Unfortunately, our director, Katie Barton-Harvey, is unable to be with us today, but we're very fortunate to have acting in her stead today, Annette Turner, and we welcome Annette to committee. Okay, let's get straight down to business. Councillors, I draw your attention to item 4.1. Item 4.1 is an e-petition for disabled toilets required for the Middle Green. Before I open to discussion on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I will now refer to the Acting Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager, Mr Ben O'Brien, to present his report. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. The report before you is in response to a petition from residents requesting disability toilets to be installed at Building 1 on the map in your reports at the Middle Green Sports Club. They're also seeking that council take responsibility for the age, wear and tear on the building, and that council work with the lessee to make this facility equitable for all. As officers, we agree that the facility is in need of disability facilities and inclusive access. And as part of our recommendation 1 in the report, we are seeking council's endorsement that I write to the club and commit our sport and recreation officers to work with the club to identify potential grants and help them apply for grant funding opportunities to pursue these upgrades and opportunities for match funding as well. As far as and I think that sort of will touch on item 3 that has been raised in the petition by residents. As far as council taking responsibility for the age, wear and tear on the building, it is noted that we have over 200 facilities across the city, and that in a recent condition assessment, the building was identified to have sort of certainly a longer structural useful life, noting that paint and flooring and the roofing could do with a bit of work. Typically, council absolutely would ensure that buildings do meet contemporary standards whenever we undertake new works or whenever we undertake refurbishments to facilities. But as you can appreciate from a financial sustainability perspective, it is not possible that we are able to keep all of our facilities refurbished as legislation standards come into fruition. So in this instance, we would like to certainly work with the club. The building is not scheduled for refurbishment in any time soon at the moment, but we'd like to work with the club to identify opportunities for funding. This creates a bit of a segue, and I appreciate it's not the easiest report to write and or to read because there's a lot of information there. There is an outstanding insurance claim where the sheeting on the roofing incurred considerable damage from a hail event a couple of years ago. This hail damage has created an element of dimpling in the roof, which means that water won't run off. Water will sit in those dimples and accelerate corrosion of that sheeting. My understanding is that the claim is currently with the assessor, and we have had a structural engineer undertake an assessment, and there will be most likely structural repairs required to support the new sheeting. So it's likely that that works won't just be replace the sheeting, there'll be structural works required. What we, as part of the third recommendation in the report, is we need to understand the extent of those structural repairs for that building, and then what that means for any further affected areas to that building to determine whether we need to undertake more works. What that means under the legislation is that whenever council undertakes new works, that any affected areas do have to be upgraded to meet contemporary standards. What we don't know at the moment with the extent of those claims from that damage is the extent of the works to determine whether these toilets would need to be upgraded or not as part of those structural repairs to support a new roof. On that note, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ben, and I'm sure the area council will have some questions, but I've got a couple if you don't mind indulging me. So, Ben, with regard to this report coming to council, the petition has actually been put together by the lessee, or has the petition been put together by residents? I'm just a bit confused.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The petition has been put together by residents and not by the club. However, the club has been engaged on 2 occasions through March and May to discuss the insurance claim and to discuss options going forwards as well.
And I note your comments regarding the insurance claim, and I can only imagine how inundated insurance companies have been in recent history, but it does seem that this has been quite a protracted process. Any idea when we're likely to hear back from the assessors?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did speak to our friends in Risk Management Insurance this morning to get an update. We don't have a time frame on when the assessors will undertake the assessment. However, we are aware that we will be working with them quite quickly to determine the scope of works and seek quotations for those replacement works. I would have to come back to yourself and Councillor Wilcox with a more definitive timeline once we can talk further with the insurers.
And just one further thing, I appreciate you bringing the report back to council. Obviously, the petitioners will be keen to hear the outcome of today's report. It's a shame that we didn't have that information back from the assessors yet, so councillors could make a more informed decision. But nonetheless, I appreciate that we don't want to leave the people who've put their names to the petition out there wondering. So thanks for bringing the report back. Okay, I'll now open the floor to any questions from any councillors. I'll go to Councillor Bradley first, and we'll come to the area councillor at the end. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Just a bit curious because we went out there not too long ago, about a year ago as councillors, and we were lobbied by the lessee. They're a business, aren't they, from memory? Am I right in thinking that?
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. They're a not-for-profit organisation, so yes, they would be classified as business, but a not-for-profit organisation, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And noting not all facilities in our city have disability access. I've got a few in Division 1 as well, and been working with the clubs to make sure that they apply for grants. Yeah, thank you.
And may I just ask that question, Ben? Similar to Councillor Bradley, I've had similar experience. That's something that SLNF would be prepared to do if the lessees of the club were of a mind to actually work together to try and ascertain whether there may in fact be some funding through, I don't know, gambling funding grants or something of that nature. If necessary, that's something that you guys would take on?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. There are a number of grant funding opportunities. There's the Gambling Benefit Fund, I believe it's called, that the state government has, and numerous other funding opportunities. Yes, where we have a lot of older buildings, and appreciate we can't refurbish them all at the same time, but where we can't refurbish them in the very short term and the facilities are in need of these facilities, then we're certainly very, very keen for our sport and recreation officers to work with those clubs to identify opportunities where possible just to help support those upgrades, not just disability facilities, but other areas of the building or other parts of the fields that they need support with. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Could you tell me, have we done the exercise to find out how much this refurbishment would cost for the disability toilets at all? Thank you.
My apologies, Councillor Murphy. Could you repeat the question?
Have we done any costings on the actual cost that it would cost to do the disability toilets?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Murphy. No, we haven't actually undertaken any estimates to work out what that would cost at this point in time.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Through Mr. O'Brien, just a quick question. Are there pokies in this sporting club?
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Yes, my understanding there is.
I have, that is what it is. My question is if we have to replace the roof and do structural repairs to the property, is there any way in which that club can ask us for some sort of compensation for the loss of income during that closure? Is that a possibility?
Through the chair, I would say that probably not. There wouldn't be any recourse. Obviously, if structural works are required, the lessee is responsible under the lease to undertake those works at their cost. So whether or not it's part of the insurance claim or council provides funding at some stage for that, or whether the lessee has to, it would be their responsibility effectively to do those works. So what that would mean for the lease is that they would have to close their premises as required for the building, and you would assume that they would have insurance that would allow them to claim for the cost of business interruption due to those works.
No worries. I was reflecting on another issue that happened previously, and I just thought I'd ask that question. We received the petition as part of the report, and it was redacted. I managed to have a look at it. Do you know how many are fully compliant on the petition when it comes to council's terms and guidelines for petitions?
I think if we have a look at, it's not page number, but there is actually a total respondents down the back at the end of that report, which is 58 valid signatures, and invalid signatures were 117. But I couldn't advise you, Councillor, as to why they were invalid. I don't know.
Well, I can, because I've seen the documents. So there are no addresses on some of it. 128 don't comply with the standards set up by council. Now, local residents obviously feel quite passionate about this, and I accept the petition for what it is. My concern is a petition is a public document that is signed for the purpose of escalating attention to an issue. I'm not quite sure where the Privacy Act comes into it, and I have asked a person from our governance team to check into that. I know that in state and federal parliament, when a petition is tabled, it's actually kept in the clerk's office so that anyone can go and have a look at it from an elected official perspective in order to receive that petition. And that didn't happen in this instance. I had to ask for a copy of it. So that's being looked into, and I imagine a report will come back on petitions back through the governance section of council. But I just thought I'd ask that question because presenting a petition is one thing. Presenting a petition that's actually valid is another thing altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. I appreciate you've investigated that. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr O'Brien, I believe in the first instance this petition would have been presented to us in ordinary council, and then it's been passed on to SLNF. Is that right, Councillor? So I'm not sure how that may have been captured in the minutes at that point in time also, so that might be something we want to investigate further as well. Thank you very much, Councillor, for raising that. We all want to do the right thing, so appreciate it. Any other questions before I go to the area, Councillor? None? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox.
Thanks. Just on the validation of the signatures and as part of the petition, we found that part of the problem was the confirmation email. So you can sign the petition, but it's the confirmation email that comes through. People weren't actually hitting confirm on that, which is where part of the problem lays. Just a couple of things. So just regarding the insurance on the buildings, Does council hold the insurance or does the lessee hold the insurance?
My understanding is it's a council building, therefore council holds the insurance. And that's why I think council has made the insurance claim as well.
Okay, so, sorry. The lease was granted in 2007 prior to the implementation of council's new endorsed leasing policy. However, with that new leasing policy, is that when the insurance switched over from Middle Green over to council?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. So although Middle Green were under an old lease, council elected at that time to take on the insurance for all buildings. So we wrote to Middle Green at that time and said, although your lease says you're responsible, council's now taking that on as a whole, and we will insure your building from here on in, and they're responsible for their contents and business insurance.
Okay, so there lays part of the problem with the building insurance not lying with the lessee in this instance, because they're the ones that can't action it because they still have the aircon that was still damaged in the storm that I believe isn't working correctly as well. But then on the other hand, the solar panels were damaged and they have been fixed, and they were sitting on the roof over the beer garden as such. So is there a couple of different insurance claims that are still concurrent, that are still running from the storm that happened in 2020?
Unfortunately, Councillor Wilcox, I don't have that information at the time. My apologies.
That's okay, that was only brought to light last night.
If I may, Councillor, just a reminder that this is pertaining to the
Yep.
e-petition specifically, so I wouldn't have anticipated that the officers would have come with that information. But
Yep.
had that being said, Mr O'Brien, could you actually take that question offline and provide the relevant information back to the councillor after committee today? Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Keep going, councillor.
Thank you. So just in regards to the e-petition and then the building, they are two separate issues. But predominantly the roof has been nearly a 2-year prolonged process. So what is the issue with the roof insurance if they lift the roof pertaining to the toilets sitting underneath, like the DDA compliant toilets? Can you just explain what the repair of the existing roof might have on effect with this?
So my understanding, and Jason, jump in here wherever I miss anything out, is that it's not a simple case of peeling off the sheeting over the trusses, if you will, and replacing the sheeting. My understanding is that those structural elements will also need to be upgraded and replaced to support that new roofing or the new sheeting. Now, once we undertake some structural works, and you're talking about trusses, then there's a determination whether you need to replace materials that support those trusses as well. Once you start to become a further extent of works, if you undertake works that affect areas of the building, then under the legislation you are obligated to ensure that any of the affected areas of a building is also upgraded to meet contemporary standards and legislation. So as part of the investigation, we need to determine what are the affected areas or that are impacted by that structural upgrade to support a new roofing. My understanding is the insurance would only cover aspects of the roofing, i.e. the sheeting, but there would still be an obligation on council to upgrade affected areas to meet legislation, and then therefore we need to understand that scope of works and how we would fund that scope of works as well, if that was to be identified, and that's what we need to determine through those investigations.
So in a nutshell, we don't know what we don't know, and will only become apparent once we remove the sheeting of the roof, and we're waiting for the assessors to come back and say, yes, green tick, go, and then I presume you'll be back to council to provide us with an update in due course.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's correct. Yeah, once the certifier goes through and understands a detailed assessment and certifies what actually needs to be done, we would be coming back to council. If it's more than just the insurance claim, we'd definitely be coming back to council with a report to understand that scope and identifying funding and get council's endorsement for that as well.
And I guess my concern is just that it's been such a protracted process for the group. I recognise that's external to the petition today, but I'm hoping that we can get the show on the road fairly quickly. Councillor, any further questions?
Just one more point. Middle Green would like to thank council for the remissions in the water and that sort of thing, but they also just want to let everyone know that they have because they're a secondary use of a trust land under the Land Act, and they are a commercial entity, but they're a not-for-profit organisation, all of the proceeds of the clubs are spent on the provisions of the facilities and the services, and it's a benefit to the club and the community. So I just wanted to let everyone know that this is by no means me sitting here going, I would like to see a service enhancement come through or anything like that, but I would like to see the outcome of the assessor's investigations. I'm concerned that it's nearly 2 years later after the storm, and now with the floods, I think it'll be protracted even longer because there's so many other insurance claims and that out there and that sort of thing. So if we can put an onus that this has been a 2-year long process, we would like to see the outcomes moving forward so that Middle Green can continue operating the way they are, and then we'll look at the DDA compliant toilets further down the track if we need be, or if that roof is lifted and that sort of thing, then we look at how to work with them then. And I do have a foreshadowed motion, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. And yes, we'll definitely seek to proactively engage with the assessor and see what type of hurry up we can get on that assessment and come back to you with those outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, now, Councillor, you've actually foreshadowed an amended motion, is that correct? If I might just pop back to you in a moment, I've still got a couple of questions from Councillor Hall and Councillor Raven. Have you actually forwarded that foreshadowed motion to the officers?
No, my apologies, I did not.
That's fine. I believe I have a copy of it here, so we'll come to that in a moment. But we'll go to Councillor Hall. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe I've been through a very similar circumstance with this with my Waterford Demons, where we've had a building that was investigated and was found to be unfit and was shut down completely. The benefit is that we did have other facilities on site that the club could use to continue and survive. I think the residents have put in this petition will need to acknowledge that there could be a risk here that the site, the building 1, could potentially be shut down as a result of the finding of this investigation. Therefore, they will have no club to go to per se if it's found to be wanting in terms of attention, because I think the residents who have submitted this just believe that council's just going to go in and put in a new roof. I don't think they quite understand that it could potentially shut the whole building down so that it can comply with current regulation. So I believe these residents who have submitted this petition need to be aware of that as well. Now, the only solution that could go forward with my club was for a new building to be put on site, which I co-funded through the LIP program. Would the area councillor be considerate of doing something similar for this club if it's found that the building itself is no longer fit for purpose, as is the fear, I think, of the residents?
So is your question, Councillor Hall, is dependent upon the outcome of
what to the area councillor if they'd be supportive of a new building and possibly putting in some lip towards that if this is found that the building is no longer fit for purpose and they have to shut it down?
Yes.
Sorry, that was yes. All right, thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Any further questions, Councillor Hall?
No, thank you.
Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Ben, you said that the outcome of the assessor's report would come back to council. Wouldn't it be more efficient just to go back to the divisional councillor and then deal with it that way? I don't understand why it would come back to council for a report, because it's like a 6-week delay on when you get the information and then it goes through another process. Wouldn't it just be quicker to liaise with the divisional councillor and then bring it up through either a service enhancement process or a LIP process or whatever it ends up being, or just a standard operational process? I don't understand why an insurance claim would come back to council.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. It's a good question. what we're anticipating is you are correct. The assessor's report we would liaise with Councillor Wilcox on in this instance. What we are anticipating potentially is coming back from the certifier if the extent of works is significantly greater than just replacing the sheeting or the truss on the roof and end up being works required outside of what would be insured, then we potentially would come back to council with a report to identify that there's further works required and that we would need to fund those works that are beyond what would be insured.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Raven, I actually think that's a really good question. I think what's unusual here is that you've got an outstanding insurance claim and a petition, and it's not often the two of those come up together. And I know that the area council was very keen to make sure that this was completely transparent and the public could see all discussion that was going on with regard to this particular issue. But I take your point. Councillor Wilcox has actually foreshadowed an amendment. If you just cast your eyes, councillors, to the recommendations on the screen behind me. Councillor Wilcox, can you outline what the amended motion would be and why?
I just have an extra point to go down the bottom, that the Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager be requested to provide a report to a future City Lifestyle Committee following the outcome of Clause 3.
I suspect that we've actually largely answered that question with Councillor Raven's question, but councillors, I'm actually going to put up the amended motion first. Councillor Bradley.
What's the purpose of the extra point, point 3? Is there a need to come back for a...
I would like it made very transparent on what's happening with the building for the community and for the public.
Can I just ask the acting manager, is that a normal process?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bradley. I think the answer to that will be similar to Councillor Raven's query in regards to if the extent of works required far exceeds that of a typical roof replacement covered under insurance, then we would be coming back to council to certainly get council endorsement on the cost of those works and the timeliness of those works, and then the funding source for those works potentially. If again, the touching on the fact that once we undertake new works under the legislation, any affected areas by that have to be upgraded to meet contemporary standards, and if that were to be the case, then potentially we would come back to council to share and understand what that scope looks like and the funding for that.
With that in mind, I'm just curious why you didn't put up number 4.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. At this time, we don't know that extent, so we put up number 3 to investigate once we understand what that extent is to be, and if it is to be far greater than the insurance claim, then yes, we would be. Yes. Well, I'll leave that up to council.
Councillor Bradley, I hear what you're saying. I think that the area councillor was looking for some surety, and that's why we have number 4. So how we'll manage this today is I'll actually test the waters with the amended motion up. If that fails, then we'll revert back to the original motion. Councillor Raven.
Sorry.
I wasn't sure if that was a hand up or a hand down.
It was a question, sorry. It was a question,
you.
Madam Chair. Just listening to Councillor Bradley, she makes a good point. What happens if the insurance will just cover it? So if we vote for number 4, you're going to bring back a report saying the insurance covers it?
In accordance with recommendation 4,
you have to bring
yes,
back a
correct.
report, no matter what.
We'd have to bring back a report. If the works are isolated to the roof and the insurance covers it, yes, that would be a bit of business as usual. However, I suspect that the Divisional Council is fairly keen to see
a report come back to say business as usual. Oh, good.
I hear what you're saying, Councillor Raven, but the issue here is that you've got a petition, so you've got a group of residents who are driving for one outcome out here. You've actually got the lessee also, and you've got the area councillor. I'm happy myself to indulge the area councillor for transparency reasons so that everybody understands what actually occurs. Otherwise, the public may not necessarily be aware of what comes back. But I take on board your point that it is somewhat redundant potentially, and we'll only know in retrospect. Thank you. Councillor Lane, did you have something you want to say?
Happy to second the motion.
Okay, councillors, you have a motion on the board behind me, and you'll note that there's a fourth item to that motion. So could everybody please just take a moment to make sure that they've read that and that they're comfortable with the motion? We've had the motion moved by Councillor Wilcox. It's been seconded by Councillor Lane. Can I see by a show of hands those who are in support of the motion? That motion has been carried, and I note, Councillor Raven, you didn't raise your hand. How do you vote, Councillor Raven?
Abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Thank you, councillors. I appreciate your assistance and your patience with that one. It was a bit tricky. It was a little bit different to usual. All right, councillors, that brings us to the end, I believe, of the manager's report. Just bear with me one tick. Yeah, we do. Just bear with me one tick. That's right. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to the end of that report. Councillors, I now draw your attention to item 4.2. Item 4.2 you'll see is a report that you've received in open, but there's also elements of the report that are in confidential. It's the Active Logan Active People Funding Program update. Councillors, before we move into discussion on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare? There being none, I trust all councillors have read the report. If we move into confidential, it's considered necessary to take the discussion of the report into a closed session, as the report includes financial data and information related to a proposal by Brisbane Bears Fitzroy Football Club, Brisbane Lions, and is considered commercial in confidence. Do any councillors wish to move into a closed session for this item? Councillor Bradley has moved. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Russell. By show of hands, can I see those who'd like to move into confidential? That has been supported with the exception of Councillor Hall. How do you vote, Councillor Hall?
Against.
And Councillor Hall has voted against. So, councillors, we'll move into confidential. We'll just take a moment for our meeting service officers to discontinue the recording. And that the live streaming has been turned back on. Excellent. We have a thumbs up from down the back. Thank you for your robust debate, councillors. You'll notice that there's a motion on the board behind me. Could I please have somebody to move that motion? Is it up? Oh, apologies. When I looked a moment ago, it was there and then it disappeared. Anyone to move the motion? Councillor Raven has moved the motion. A seconder for the motion. We were in confidential session, Mr. Mayor. So, but that being said, the Mayor has moved the motion on the board. That motion has been seconded by Councillor Raven. Can I see by a show of hands support for the motion? That has been supported with the exception of Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley, how do you vote?
Against, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Just one moment, councillors. Councillors, just clarifying, you were all happy for us to move out of confidential? I wasn't sure if I'd actually invited your vote. Yes. Everyone's happy? Very good. Thank you. I didn't imagine you wanted to spend the rest of the day there. Yes, I have these lovely ladies on my right here keeping me on the straight and narrow. Ashley is doing a cracking good job. Okay, councillors, that actually brings us to the end of the Acting Sport, Leisure and Facility Manager's report. Do we have any general business for the Acting Manager? Thank you, Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much for taking my call yesterday, Mr. O'Brien. We had an issue at Oates Park and your team is working on it and I'm extraordinarily appreciative of it. Sometimes when we do things in council, we do it with the best of intentions and we don't quite always get it right, but that's okay. Fixing the problem and addressing it is just great, and the residents were so happy when I went back to them to say, this is being looked into, it'll be done. So good on your team.
Thank you, Ben. Do we have any other general business for the Acting Manager? Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand, Ben, this might not be for you, so it might be for the Acting Director because it could be sitting in Community Services. But Marsden Park, which is not the shopping centre but the park on 3rd Avenue, has an interesting lease and we've been trying to build some new facilities there for years now, and there's about, from memory, $300,000 of LIP funding committed to a project that the last update I had was a terrified consultant about a year ago who gave me a very expensive price that was more than double the cost to build a very small building. I'd love to know where that one was at, but I think it's been shifted from your team back to Community Services. Happy to be corrected.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Yeah, I'm more than happy to follow up that for you offline with the Acting Community Services Manager, where my understanding is the funding resides, and happy for us to come back to you, because no doubt Sports, Leisure and Facilities would be involved in
building it.
Building
yes,
that.
That's
yes.
right. Good. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Do I have any other general business for the Acting Manager? I'd just like to make a comment. Ben, I know that you've had some challenging circumstances of late, and I would just like to thank you for going the extra mile. Your professionalism is greatly appreciated, and I'd like to acknowledge that. Ben, do you have any general business for us?
No general business for council. Just on a personal note, I'd like to wish my wife a very speedy recovery if she's watching. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Councillor Bradley actually did have an item that had been submitted ahead of time, Councillor Bradley, which was actually, just before you duck off, Ben, it relates to the future leasing opportunities for the Underwood Park Cafe. And forgive me, I should have picked that up sooner. So would you mind hanging around for just a little longer, Ben? Thank you so much. Nearly made it. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you so much. Yes, my apologies. An EOI is going out on Monday, but for the cafe, but the previous lessees raised concerns about the facilities, and hence why they basically pulled out. It just doesn't meet the needs of the community. The community would love food, and when it was built during administration, it got changed to what the original plan was. It was supposed to be a proper commercial cafe, and we got like a little, how can I describe it, a little room A kiosk, that's it. We've got a kiosk instead. So it doesn't have the proper sinks, the proper requirements that you need for a licence to have food. So on one hand, you've got a facility, but on another hand, it's not meeting the requirements of the local area. So I want to foreshadow this report. We might get someone who is quite happy with just serving coffee. I doubt it though. So through the EOI, which starts on Monday. So this is the reason why I'm asking for this report, because I'm hoping this will look at the bigger picture that it's just really not meeting the needs and will never ever be viable unless something is done about it.
Can I just jump in there? So, Councillor Bradley, do I understand this correctly? Because I recall this coming up to Council when we looked at a couple of facilities across the city. But the EOI goes out on Monday. We're not waiting to find out who takes up the EOI before you call the report back?
I've had discussions with officers behind the scenes about this. That, like I said, we might very well get someone who's quite happy. But I just want to have this as a background, in the process. If we don't get anyone who's suitable through the EOI, because once they see it's a kiosk, alarm bells will possibly go off for some people. And they will probably go, well, what's the use? It's not going to be viable. So
your concern is it's not fit for purpose. That's what I'm hearing.
It's
Is that right?
not fit for
Okay.
purpose, in my opinion.
That's fine. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
Ben, have you got any comments with regard to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bradley. Yes, the facility previously had a commercial lease around it. However, the previous tenant had identified that the facility with its current offering was not viable for that to be a commercial lease. We currently are going out for expression of interest, certainly at a reduced level of service where potentially coffee is also an offering into other activities that could be out there. Should that not be a viable option for the market, then yes, agree, we would bring back a report to Council to share with Council our findings in regards to our two ventures to try and activate that facility in that area, and options going forwards if we can't achieve the level of activation that we think we need for that area.
So Councillor Bradley has foreshadowed a motion which is behind me on the board. Did you want to add an additional clause to that motion along the lines of subject to the outcomes of the expression of interest, or otherwise you're bringing a report back either way, aren't you?
I think this just covers either or. I don't know. It's up to you.
I'm happy to add in that subject to the outcomes of the expression of interest. If we get an outstanding submission that's going to completely activate the area, that the area is deserving that Councillor Bradley identifies, and I think that's a good thing and may not be needed. However, should that expression of interest not identify, then yes, that would be correct. We would be coming back for a report.
You satisfied with that, Councillor Bradley? Yeah, satisfied with that, Ben? Okay. Councillors, Councillor Bradley has foreshadowed a motion which is on the board behind me. Can I have somebody to move that motion? Councillor Bradley has moved. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. By a show of hands, can I see support for the motion? Excellent, thank you. That has been carried unanimously. And Ben, I'm sure I don't have to ask, but please keep Councillor Bradley updated on the EOI process and what the outcomes of that process are. And yes, Councillor Bradley.
Indulge, please. I want to thank Councillor Russell for sharing my post about the EOI. I've already had one email from someone, but like I said, I suspect we're going to be down that road that I have foreshadowed anyway.
No problem. And once again, thank you, Ben, and I appreciate you've got to get away, so good to have you. Okay, councillors, that completes the agenda for today, but that being... Yes, I know, I haven't forgotten. That being said, does anyone have any, general business for the Acting Director of Community Services? And I believe that Councillor Murphy has an item she'd like to raise.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your time, councillors. As you're aware, in our role, we are out in our communities and so usually are our partners. So today I'm providing a statement with regards to conflict of interest. I have previously declared a conflict of interest in relation to a local infrastructure program relating to the Beenleigh RSL Club. The conflict arose because my husband was on the board of that club. As the project was not required to be presented to the committee for consideration, I have never required to declare the conflict in this forum. In an abundance of transparency, I wish to advise Councillor of that conflict, but also advise that my husband has now resigned from the RSL Club and therefore I do not believe that I have a conflict moving forward. In transparency, I've had to present this to committee and to be transparent to my community as well, making any decisions moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Murphy, did you actually receive advice from City Governance on how to manage this particular one?
Yes, I did. This memo statement was presented to me with the correct wording for this outcome, and I have spoken to my fellow councillors yesterday.
Councillor Raven, could I just ask you for some advice here? So Councillor Murphy's actually got a memo that's sitting in front of her, and that won't necessarily find its way onto public record other than the fact that it's in the recording today. Should we be tabling that memo? Okay, so my apologies. I probably should have managed this a little better. So Councillor Murphy's actually raised a revised conflict of interest. She has a memo in front of her today. And Councillor Murphy, would you like to table that memo for consideration by councillors?
Yes, please.
Councillor Murphy has tabled that memo. Do I have somebody to second receiving that memo? Thank you, Councillor Raven. That's been received. Just one moment, councillors. We'll just defer to some music on hold. Won't be a moment. It's Gordon Lightfoot in the lift music, isn't it? Yeah. Henry Mancini. Councillors, I'd like to thank you for putting me through my paces today. Councillors, you'll actually note behind me that the document presented to the City Lifestyle Committee by Councillor Murphy has been tabled. We've had a mover and a seconder for that. Have we recorded? And the mover for that was Councillor Murphy, and the seconder for that was Councillor Raven. And can I see by a show of hands, just to be clear, those who are agreeable with receiving that document for tabling? And that has been unanimously supported. We note that Councillor Murphy has spoken to that document, and Councillor Murphy, that document will now be captured as public record.
Thank you, through the chair.
Excellent. Thank you, councillors. Now, councillors, do we have any general business for Annette, the Acting Director of Community Services? I have an item from Councillor Bradley. Thank you, Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. This is really going to put you on the spot. But anyway, this morning...
This is how we roll today, Councillor Bradley. Off you go.
This morning I opened my my letterbox and I had a newsletter from Councillor Russell. Oh. And I'm just curious, I'm not sure if it's the marketing that does the newsletters, but they've obviously got the wrong boundaries. Because I'm definitely in Division 1.
Councillor Bradley, I'll take a brief. I'll
Yes.
take a brief moment to speak to this because I've been working with the marketing department, and I'm disappointed for you that that's occurred, and also for Councillor Russell. I recognise that that is confusing for residents, and I'm sure that I'll let Annette speak to how we move forward on this. But I do know there were some challenges with regard to where boundary lines rest, and we were all keen to make sure all residents of each respective division receive correspondence from the relevant councillor, and I apologise, I believe this will be a teething problem that we have with our
100%,
distribution
because
company.
That the boundary distribution with 1 and 3 was a huge shift. So I am concerned that a large amount of people have received that.
And now I'll pass to Annette to close the loop on this one, if you can, Annette, please.
Through the chair, I really apologise for that incident that's happened, and it's certainly something that I'll be referring to the acting manager of marketing and events to follow up on, find out what went wrong, and to rectify the situation. So thank you for raising it.
Councillor Russell?
Thank you so much, through your chair. I just wanted to add to that, actually a big thank you to the marketing team who have also done a lot of very quick work to support to get that newsletter out, and so I can appreciate that there's, you know, the teething problems had the possibility of happening, but yeah, I'd also like to just check that everybody else in Division 3 will also end up with one of those. So thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors, for receiving that with good spirit, and I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of it. And I'd just like to acknowledge the Mayor for his ongoing advocacy with regard to community newsletters getting out. So thank you, Mr Mayor. Moving on. Okay, councillors, I'm going to actually ask if we have any general business from the Acting Director of Community Services, Annette.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors, Mr Mayor. I'd like to take this opportunity to provide a very brief update on the tender process for the buzz at Yarrabilba. So the design of this community facility allows for the community to connect with each other and provide learning and employment pathways through training and development. You'd all be aware of the progress of the buzz. This facility is located between 2 secondary schools, and as such it's going to be important that part of this facility is dedicated to youth as a youth space. In advance of the tender process, on the 25th of May, Council released an early tender notification via TenderLink, advertising the upcoming tender for the facility. And this has been widely promoted and continues to be promoted until the release of the actual tender, which will be this Friday. And the tender will be open from mid-June, from this Friday till mid-July.
Hugely excited about that project, Annette, from the area councillor's perspective, but from the whole of City, it's a very, very interesting project, the Buzz, and we've done a lot of great work out there. Councillors, we're just about to close, but before we do, I just wanted to say to Annette to please pass on to the events team. We talked about LEAF when Hugh were presenting the other day, and I'd just like to say that that was a partnership, of course, with Council's events team, and what a magnificent event it was. And the feedback from residents that I spoke with was very favourable. Everyone always enjoys it every year, and please pass on my thanks, and I believe the thanks of many councillors here on conducting yet another great event. So thank you. Just finishing on a high, everybody. Okay, councillors, that brings us to the end of the City Lifestyle meeting of the 15th of June 2022, and we're concluding at 10:07 a.m. The meeting of the City Governance Committee will commence in 10 minutes. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.